in our society. Most of us are old enough to remember Bell Pottinger. We have seen AI undress women on social media. And these are some of the harms that I think we need to balance as we warmly welcome innovation and digital inclusion. So this roundtable, we believe, then marks a significant moment for this parliament. We're going to engage on a medium that's become rapidly a cornerstone of cultural expression, a powerful tool for journalism and storytelling, and a growing engine for digital entrepreneurship. That the podcasting sector has grown in South Africa is undeniable. From political commentary, as I see Dr. Mbofu Walsh walked in, to community storytelling, from education to entrepreneurship, podcasts are really enriching our public discourse, and they're providing platforms for voices that are often unheard in traditional media. We believe that this is a success story of innovation and digital inclusion. But this rapid growth, colleagues, fellow South Africans present, also brings us to a critical juncture. The legislative and policy frameworks that govern our communication landscape were, for the most part, designed for a bygone era. If you look at just our Electronic Communications Act, it was built around the concept of linear broadcasting, scarce spectrum, and does not easily apply to on-demand internet-based world of podcasting. So this misalignment, therefore, presents a structural regulatory gap. While the Constitution, POPIA, the Cybercrimes Act provide a foundational floor of rights and responsibilities, what we believe we lack is a coherent, forward-looking framework for the sector. So the question before us is not, as I said, whether podcasting should be regulated, but how do we create a fit-for-purpose governance framework that protects public interest, the safety of minors, and the integrity of our democratic discourse without stifling the creativity, innovation, and freedom of expression that makes podcasts so powerful? Now, this is where I think government also comes in, and we're pleased to have the Deputy Minister here. In November of last year, government gazetted for comment a draft white paper on audio and audiovisual media services and an online safety policy that provides a crucial starting point and offers a vision of a technology-neutral, risk-based, and proportional approach. This vision must now be turned into action. I think it's also important that we must clarify the respective roles of Parliament and the Executive in this discussion. Our facilitator for the day will be Mr. Dimitri Martinez, and I know one thing that he's passionate about as well is the respective roles of not only Parliament, the Executive, but also the regulatory bodies that have joined us today. So the Executive, through the department, has initiated policy reform, like I said, and seeks to modernize the regulatory framework. Parliament, however, the representatives of the people, carry the constitutional responsibility to exercise oversight and assess the adequacy of these policy intervention, and ultimately, as lawmakers, the process, the legislative reforms that will be required to address the gaps. So the committee's role in convening this roundtable, therefore, is necessary and appropriate. It ensures that any further legislative intervention will be informed by evidence and stakeholder input. I cannot stress this enough. We thought that it would be improper for us to be engaging in this topic without calling you, the industry players, to discuss co-creation and what the output should look like. So instead of duplicating the work of the Executive, ours is to ensure that by the time any legislation or policies come to Parliament, we would have engaged with the sector to find the way forward. And finally, maybe let me just say, we're not here with a predetermined outcome. I know that the initial letters that were sent out spoke about co-regulation, self-regulation, and this and the other thing. And I hope you would have seen that we took a conscious decision that there's no predetermined outcome. It is the voices in this room and in further consultations that will define what podcasting and the entire sector should look like. So we are solidifying the work that we're going to be doing around legislative reform. We have adopted as a committee a legislative framework agenda, and the insights we gain today will be invaluable as we shape our oversight and legislative reform participation. So on behalf of the committee, I do invite you to speak candidly. Please do share your concerns, your aspirations, and your ideas. and let's work together to chart a path forward that ensures the podcasting and digital content creation ecosystem continues to thrive while contributing to a safer, more accountable, and more inclusive digital media environment for all South Africans. I'm going to hand over to Mr. Martinez, but I do want to, okay, I've just been given some apologies. The Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies has sent his apology. He's not able to join us today. The Director General of the department has just arrived. I also see amongst us our regulators, and maybe for the sake of completeness, let me confirm the regulators who are present. I see the chairperson of ICASA, Mr. Ramusi, is with us. Yiti Shine. I believe that the representatives from the Film and Publication Board are here. I'm not sure who's here. The chairperson of the board, excuse Mamgozi, you are welcomed. The info, okay, I haven't seen Palisa. .Zedna, which is the domain name authority representing the chairperson, you are welcome. And then the information regulator is also present. Where are they? Shine. All right. Don't be intimidated by these regulators. They're still trying to find themselves. They keep talking about a regulator of the future, and hopefully today we'll be able to define what that looks like. We're also joined in the room by students from the University of Stellenbosch. They are BA honors students. Itani Shine. They are led by, I think, Dr. Ngube, so you are very much welcome. We do have the industry present. I know that the SA Podcasters Guild is present, independent podcasters. We've also invited the platforms. I do believe we had confirmations from TikTok, YouTube, Google, and you will see them during the course of the presentations. Okay, I see. And Meta. And then Sisnom Vuisopaki is also here. She's the CEO of the Association for Communications and Technologies, which is the association representing the mobile network operators. So it is indeed a full house. The MNOs, I'm getting pressure next to me to mention them. Okay, Vodacom is here, MTN is here, Telkom is here, Rain is here, Cell C is here. We're missing Liquid Telecommunication, but I'm sure they'll come. Mr. Dimitri, a seasoned broadcasting and regulatory expert, may I then hand over to you to take us forward?
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson, and Honourable members of the committee and guests of the committee in Parliament today. It really is, I was reminded by Honourable Subrati that this is a historic event. There's never been such a gathering of so many people and this particular diversity of people. So welcome to everybody. My role is really to facilitate the discussion to make sure that we get through what is quite a full program today. We have really just 4 or 5 different areas that we're going to touch on today. Most important is to learn from each other, to understand the perspectives that we bring, the different perspectives. And as the Honourable Chair said, this is the beginning of a conversation. This is certainly not the end of a process, but rather a conversation, a very necessary conversation that should extend beyond today, not only happening here in Cape Town, but around the country. And certainly we will look to our colleagues in government and the regulator to be convening similar meetings across the country to make sure that we get to hear from every corner and every possible space on what is a really, really important topic. So we'll start with just a very short presentation clarifying some concepts as we found in discussing this and looking at the discussion on social media that's happening already, that there really are very different understandings. Is podcasting, broadcasting, and many other such things. So looking at some proposed outcomes, which is really raising some questions. We'll then have a presentation from the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies on the state of podcasting in the country from a policy perspective, some international case studies, and then we'll have the really meaty discussions, which will be our panel discussions. We'll then break for lunch, and the honorable members have got some other parliamentary work, so some of them won't be here, or maybe all won't be here, but we will continue with our discussions in what are 4 themes, but we've actually created 2 groups, and then we'll have a report back and a way forward. So some of the key questions which we're really looking to address: definitions, online safety and remedies, complaints handling and regulation, data privacy, measurement, equity and development. I'm not going to go into this in detail because the panel members and discussions, I really wanted to get to what some people are calling these days not debunking but pre-bunking some concepts. So we anticipating where there's perhaps misunderstanding or different understandings. And the first is to recognize that we are now working in a really converged environment. And this has been something that legislation has recognized as far back as 2005 with the promulgation of the Electronic Communications Act. And we have essentially different industries that are now, on your telephone, you can now watch television. It's that sort of simple perspective, but really wanted to get to understanding networks, because it's a phrase and a concept that is used very much interchangeably with the term platform. So let's start with what is a network. Radio and television is a live medium in real time. It's something that goes from one to many. Podcasts are accessed on demand, and we talk about that as a one-to-one. I'm going to show you a graphic representation in a moment. Now, podcasts can be streamed in real time, and radio is also broadcast and pre-recorded and broadcast over the air. What is different is how it is accessed. So we talk about point-to-point communication, which is a one-to-one, and we also talk about a return path. Broadcasting is a one-to-many. We talk about point-to-multipoint. So the very architecture of the networks that we see, for example, Centec, which is the signal distributor in the country, establishes networks. There's a particular type of infrastructure to carry radio and television signals. The telecommunications operators establish networks which are point-to-point, the one-to-one communication. Broadcasting, as it's defined, is any form of unidirectional, so one to many. And looking at it from just a purely graphic perspective, it's one signal that is being transmitted and anyone can receive it simply by tuning in on their radio or television. So from a TV perspective, if you've got a rooftop antenna, you will receive an over-the-air transmission. That is the coverage map. We talk about that as a footprint or a coverage of a transmitter network. Anyone that falls within that coverage area is able to receive that signal. There's also a satellite reception mode, and you can think of a satellite simply as a transmitter that's in the sky. It's located in the sky, and there is a direct reception from that. We talk about the footprint of a satellite. There are two types, but actually there are more than two, but for our purposes, you have a C-band or a KU band. A KU band is a much more focused signal, but any body that has a satellite dish within that footprint is able to receive exactly the same broadcast transmission. And then we have cable. Now, this is where our one-to-one communication happens, where we are receiving either via fiber or we are receiving over wireless broadband. And when we say receiving, actually, we're not receiving in the same way as broadcasting, we are fetching. And this is the key difference. With a podcast, it's not automatically received over the air as a broadcast is. A person has to go online, has to consume data, and has to go and fetch the content that they have selected. That's why we refer to it as on-demand content. So that was one of the key ideas that I wanted to impress upon the audience today. Now, another concept is the idea of over the top. And essentially, what we're talking about here is service providers that are making use of the infrastructure that has been deployed by others, in our case, mobile and fixed line telecoms operators. In other words, the over-the-top services are not investing in infrastructure themselves. They're coming in over the top of infrastructure that has been placed by the licensed operators in the country. And the latest concept, which is artificial intelligence, we talk about AI already embedded in the way in which audiences discover, think of TikTok, YouTube, engage with, think of personalized feeds, and pay for content. And that is something which I think, Chairperson, you probably want to have a discussion in the future. There has been discussion about regulation of AI, but that's somewhere else. So what I wanted to say about AI is that media isn't competing with other media anymore. It's competing with algorithmically optimized attention platforms. That's quite a mouthful, but something that I'd really like us to think about. As I was doing the research for this, I discovered that in Colombia, there is an AI avatar that is actually running in elections, recognized. So honorable members, I'm not sure whether you'll be sending your avatars in future, but this is just something lighter as we move on to the last concept. What is a platform? Again, there's been a lot of conflation between the concept of a network and a platform, and we refer to sometimes a service as a platform. In its essence, a platform is a combination of hardware and software for example, operating systems that run our phones and our computers, that serve as a foundation for building other applications. So podcasts, for example, and often reducing the development time and cost, which is why there is so much controversy around the issue of over-the-top services making use of technology or infrastructure that has been invested in by others. So the idea of disruptive technologies, you will probably all know the logos. The one on the right is OpenClaw. Now, the introduction of a disruptive technology forces traditional businesses like our telcos in the past to alter the way they approach their business, otherwise they risk losing market share. What I wanted to get to is, I'd like you to guess how long it took some of these disruptive technologies, and you can make a note, to reach 1 million viewers. It took Netflix 3.5 years to reach 1 million subscribers. It took Airbnb 2.5 years. Facebook, 10 months. Spotify, 5 months to reach 1 million subscribers. The iPhone, 74 days. Instagram, 45 days. Are you seeing a pattern? 5 days. ChatGPT took 5 days to reach 1 million. And today, ChatGPT, among many other AI systems, has 2 billion visits per day. That's right, Honorable Deputy Minister, 2 billion per day. So let's very briefly get an overview from my perspective before the department presents, just to give you some facts and figures. The South African audiovisual landscape, as defined in the white paper, talks about content creators on the left-hand side of your screen. And I've given just 1 or 2 examples of content creators. Then we have in the middle, the national networks, which excludes radio broadcasters. That's on the next screen. There was just too many to put into one. You then have over-the-top services, and you'll recognize some of those logos. Your television distributors, and then your consumers. So if you look at the bottom of that screen, the way in which the white paper defines the new ecosystem, you have creation, aggregation, delivery, and viewing. Podcasters sit with the content creators. That's our radio landscape, plus over 200 community radio stations and hundreds of podcasters. I've been able to get the members of the South African Podcasters Guild, and there are many other podcasters that aren't members. And that's just the South African landscape. Let's briefly talk about how many people are using what. We've got 50.8 million people using the internet. 26.7 of those use social media. We've got 124 million cellular mobile connections. People have more than one. And you also have machines that have little, what are those things called now? I've just forgotten the little card that we put, the SIM card. You see the numbers there of the social media users in South Africa. How do we access the internet? The vast majority of South Africans still rely on mobile internet, and you'll see there across the different provinces, very different numbers. But we need to ask, who's really connected? There isn't equitable access in the country. And that's one of the big challenges, both for the policymakers the regulator, and indeed the legislators. When we look at the penetration of 3G and 4G, it's quite high across the country, but to really be accessing internet of the future, you need 5G. You can look at that very unequal access. This comes from ICASA's State of the Sector report. And so these are some of the questions that we need to be talking about as we look at the future. In terms of internet usage, I just wanted to move to this one. 80% of users of Facebook below the age of 45. Where do we get our news from? This is some research that was done by a company called BrandMap. And before I do that, let's just remind ourselves who these different generations are. We've got the silent generation, the boomers, Gen X, the millennials. I'm looking at the circles at the top, Gen Z, and then we also have, apparently, they're called Alpha, the ones that were born after 2010, Honorable Chair and members and all guests. So if you look very briefly, and this presentation will be made available to you, so please don't worry if I'm moving quite quickly. I'm trying to make up some time. If you have a look, the boomers are still reading newspapers, Gen X still, and radio and television is up there. As we move to our younger generations, you can see they're getting their news from TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and then radio, and then friends and family, even WhatsApp. Is that the news if we receive it via WhatsApp? In terms of podcasts and internet usage, we have 75%, as we mentioned, of the population spending 9 hours. Now, that doesn't mean that they're constantly on, but they're using it in conjunction with some other device, right? So while we're typing away on our computer, the radio is playing in the kitchen and the television is on in the lounge. So who owns that consumer? That's for the BRC to answer. 62% of adults listen to podcasts today versus 55% only 6 years ago. And 58% of adults are habitual YouTube viewers. The streaming platforms, these are your video streaming platforms. These are the 3 big ones in South Africa. You can see the numbers there. Netflix as a dominant platform. Essentially, there I just wanted to just show the frequency of use. 31% of users watch Netflix every day, and 48 more than once a week. If YouTube was a channel, it would be the largest channel in South Africa, bigger than SABC1, which has 22.6 million monthly viewers. Video streaming, you look at the past 12 years, it has grown. This is exponential growth. But what I wanted to move to is the ad spend and the impact this has had. If you look at global revenues and the number of users, but where is all the revenue going? To internet. Look at television, dropping, look at radio, out of home, all of the traditional media. The figures that came out of the Competition Commission hearing shows that more than 50% of all advertising is going to the digital platforms. These are unregulated. I know our colleagues from the digital platforms are going to help us understand this new world, but indeed, we talk about regulatory parity as a really, really important concept when we talk about the regulation of media in South Africa. I just wanted to pull 3 ideas. The white paper talks about potentially merging the regulators or potentially creating a new regulator, expanding the scope of regulation to include nonlinear audiovisual services, most importantly, online safety. Podcasts, I would say, can be defined as on-demand audio and audiovisual media services that are delivered over electronic communication networks. And we talk about regulatory, co-regulatory. As the chair said, there hasn't been any particular idea. We're here to open the conversation, get the conversation going, and think about these things, understand, most importantly. Very briefly, to show that as legislation over time has evolved, there is certainly legislation that protects consumers, that it is able to deal with different aspects of potential harms, etc., right up to and including the Cyber Crimes Act and the Prevention and Combating of Hate Speech Act. And then we have, from a policy perspective, which is the green arrow, the white paper, which has been spoken about. Finally, just some, from an international perspective, the European Union has adopted a legislative framework through the Digital Services Act. It requires large digital platforms to publish transparency reports detailing content moderation practices. The United Kingdom regulates digital media platforms and places legal obligation on platforms that host user-generated content, including podcast distribution platforms. The US digital platforms provides their Communication Decency Act provides liability protection for platforms hosting user-generated content while allowing them to moderate content according to their policies. Really important distinction here as well between user-generated content and podcasts. And I'm sure as we go into the panels, and we have a lot of very clever people here who are going to be telling us about definitions and defining all of these different types of content. Looking at another 3 countries, Australia operates a co-regulatory media governance system. Industry bodies develop codes of practice for digital content services, including online audio, while the regulator ensures compliance with public interest obligations. Brazil has adopted a multi-stakeholder governance model, and that's actually quite an interesting. Governance is coordinated through an internet steering committee, which includes representatives from government, civil society, academia, and industry. Certainly some interesting models. Kenya provides a continental example of hybrid digital media regulation. They have a media council that oversees media standards, and it also enforces a code of conduct and practice for journalism that applies to digital media, including online publications and podcast-style journalism. So that was really just very briefly to touch on some key concepts, look at some examples, and get the discussion going. So I'm just going to flight the program so you have an idea of what is coming up, because we will now move to our panels. No, first we have actually the DCDT that's going to be presenting. And if I could ask, is it Dimakatso? Will it be the Deputy Minister, Mr. Mashile? But let me show you what's coming up. You have seen it earlier. That is our program for the day. And we'll have, will it be Mr. Mashile? Okay. and then we will move to our
Sorry,
panels.
Demetrius.
Yes,
Sorry. We are in your hands totally.
yes.
But then there are a parliamentary protocol that we have to adhere to. So maybe before Mr. Mashile comes in, let's ask the Deputy Minister if he'd like to say a few words, and then we'll proceed with the presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair.
It's a surprise, Chairperson. But when the idea came, I got fascinated because I'm a YouTube fanatic. I have come across a lot of podcasts